Welcome back to the Retirement Planning MadeEasy.com show. I am your host, as always, Chris Hammond, and this show is geared toward retirees and people that are going to retire maybe within the next 10, 15 years, and they want to make sure they're doing the right things with their investments, their tax planning, their distribution strategies. Want to also make sure that they have saved enough to retirement. They just don't want to have to worry about that anymore. So we talk about all those things on this show. And on today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about this concept of the power of present actions on your future retirement and what that can positively do for yourself. So one of the big things that I think everybody should be doing that works for an employer that has an employer sponsored plan, that would be something like a 401k, a 403b. If you're a federal government employee, that would be your TSP, whatever it's called for wherever you work. If there's an employer sponsor plan and that employer will match your contributions, then I would highly encourage you to take that present action today because it will have a huge future impact on you later. Now, for those of you that are retired, obviously this doesn't apply. But for those that are getting close to retirement, even that 10 or that 15 years that you have left to go in the workforce, I would highly encourage you to take that reduction in your living standard in the present to have that positive impact on your future retirement. And what I mean is put that money that you have to into that 401k at least to get the full match that your employer will match you on those contributions. It is literally free money. And you don't want to ever pass up on free money unless there is just some really strong reason that you would need all of your paycheck coming straight to you and not having it go into your 401k, at least to get that free money from your employer. Employers that match, they're going to match in a couple of different ways. So you may have partial matches. That would be one example. And that would be something you'd be familiar with if for every dollar you put in, they'll match 50 cents up to a certain point. So if they say we'll match up to 3% and you want to get that full match, then what that would mean on a partial match situation is that you would have to put in 6% of your paycheck to get the full 3% match of the full max free money that they're going to give you. Another one would be dollar for dollar matches. So you put in $100, they match it $100 up to a certain percentage. And then there are some that are non-matching contributions where they're going to put money in there regardless of whether or not you're making contributions to that as well. The TSP plan for federal government employees will do the first 1% just goes in whether or not you make that contribution yourself or not. And then beyond that, there are some partial matches that come into play. So I would highly encourage you to do this. There might be a few reasons why somebody would not want to get the match. If you had a 401k plan that just had horrendous choices for where your money's going to be invested in it, and the limitations were going to be, just not really in your favor, maybe you wouldn't want to do this to get that free money. But it really needs to be looked at on a case by case basis. But for most people, you're going to want that employer match because it's free money. You just have to reduce your standard of living a little bit today in order to get that. And for most people, once you do that, you get accustomed to what your paycheck that arrives in your bank account is at that point. And a lot of times you don't even miss it that it's happening, and your future self will thank you for it. Another one would be to pay taxes now and grow your tax-free bucket of money. One concept you may have heard of when it comes to financial planning is the idea of buckets. And we typically think of buckets in the sense that I have my bucket of money for my current spending that I'll need in the next, say, 5 years. And then I'm going to have this other bucket of money that I can invest a little bit more aggressively. And it might be for years 6 through 15. And then beyond that, I have a bucket of money that can be invested much more aggressively. That's typically what we think of when we think of buckets and planning for retirement. But this is a different concept that I'm talking about. I'm talking about types of taxation buckets. So not all of your incomes are going to be taxed and treated the same when it comes to taxes in the IRS. So breaking it down is as easily as possible. You have three main buckets of money. If you're watching this show on the YouTube channel, I've got a picture up here that you can see. If you're listening to it on the podcast, I'll walk you right through it. But your three buckets of types of taxable money and savings that you have would be your taxed now buckets, and those are things like non-qualified is the phrase that we use for that. So if you have a brokerage account and when it pays dividends to you, you have to claim that dividend income on your tax return every year. That would be a taxed now. Now, in the present, every year you have to pay taxes on the earnings. Or if you have a capital gain because you sell some stock, that would be considered a non-qualified account. It's taxed now, and you have to claim it as income. Maybe you have to claim it as a dividend income, maybe, or it's an interest income, or maybe it's a capital gain. That can be impact how it's taxed as well. You also have another bucket called tax later. This is what you typically think of with your traditional 401k. And a lot of people are heavy in that middle bucket, the one for tax later, where a lot of their money is in a 401k. It's never had taxes paid on it yet because you get the tax write-off during the year that you make that contribution, which benefits you today. But down the road, when you start pulling from it in retirement, you have to claim it as income and pay tax on it. And then we have the last bucket called taxed never. And really, the more accurate way to say that is the money has already been taxed, and then it goes into these accounts like a Roth account. And then whatever it grows to, it's not taxed at. So once it's in that account, it's not taxed as long as you follow the rules. There's a few rules with that we're not going to get into today. But that's what the Roth accounts are. And those are your three main buckets. And so when we talk about buckets in retirement when it relates to taxes, it's talking about having a mixture of the different types of these right here, the ones that are taxed now, taxed later, or the ones where the earnings and the growth is taxed never. So when you're working, oftentimes it makes more sense, and this is why we see it, that a lot of people overload their traditional IRAs and 401ks because they're getting that tax write-off during their highest earning years so that they can reduce the taxes that they're paying right away under the plan that when they retire, hopefully they'll be in a lower tax bracket and pay less there. But we're not assured what taxes will be later on. And what happens a lot of times is that people that are very diligent and very successful in saving, they can accumulate very large accounts in traditional IRAs or traditional 401ks. And then they get to the point in retirement, especially once they hit the age of having to take required minimum distributions, that the IRS makes them take certain amounts out, claim it as income, and those balances can be quite significant, which can cause them problems in retirement as far as higher taxes. Maybe they have to pay higher amounts on their Medicare premiums because their income is shown higher. Maybe they have to start paying taxes on their Social Security benefits because their income is higher because of these large taxed later accounts that they need. Or if somebody needs to pull a lump sum out of an account to pay for a big purchase in retirement, that can artificially boost them up during that 1 year, or I should say temporarily boost them up in that 1 year to a higher tax bracket. So that's why it's important that when you have a diversity of taxable accounts and how they are broken up between the three, you can actually be flexible with pulling some from one account and some from another to help you to manage your tax bracket. Now, to do that, that means in the present, you may have to pay the taxes now and not get the tax write-off if you put money into that Roth IRA or that Roth 401k, for instance. So that's something to think about as it could help you benefit your future self in retirement. Now, before we get to the next one, I want to remind you, if you haven't gone to retirementplanningmadeeasy.com, be sure to head over there, check it out. I have a recorded webinar masterclass called Reaching Retirement and Thriving Beyond, where I go in to into detail showing you how a customized financial strategy can help you overcome the three main threats that you face in retirement. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go on over there and click on it. You can get instant access to it. Now, the last one that I want to talk to you about the power of present actions on your future retirement is the idea that compounding growth is still your friend even in retirement. So when you retire, you don't get to the point where it's like I'm no longer investing my money long term because I'm retired. I have to have everything in cash. It's not really the reality that you probably want to be living in. Compounding is still going to be your friend. Now, I want to show you this slide here, and it's just a simple slide that shows what would 500,000 growing at 6% every year, what would it grow to over 20 years with no extra contributions made to it all, just straight up. You start off with 500,000. What does it grow to? Well, it grows to about 1.6 million over 20 years. Now, you may be thinking, but I'm retired. That doesn't apply to me. I don't have 20 years. The reality is your retirement could easily last 20 plus years. That's a lot of years that you want to be today in the present doing the right steps to take care of the future you that's still going to be around 20, 25, 30 plus years in retirement. And so compounding growth is still your friend even in retirement. And it just involves you letting that money work and letting it be invested properly so that you can get that growth over time to take care of you later on. And I've mentioned this before in the show. There is this fine line that retirees have to walk. Oftentimes they can't just let that savings and that portfolio just sit there and never touch it for 20 years because they have to pull money from it to supplement their social security income that may not be enough to cover their lifestyle expenses, right? So there is this fine line that you have to draw, and a lot of times you're not going to be able to just have the money sit there and grow for 20 years and not be touched. But compounding still does work for you during this time because you're not going to spend all of your money. Hopefully, you're not going to, or else you'd have that big concern that everybody's trying to avoid of running out of money in retirement. So that's a huge thing to think about when it comes to your retirement and the actions you take presently to take care of your future self. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that the little things that you do today can have a big impact on what your tomorrows are going to look like, especially when it comes to a long time period of potentially being retired for sure. And the last bottom line point to take away is get help if it's needed. You may not know what should I invest my 401k in, given these options that my employer provides, which are the best ones for me at this stage of life that I'm in. How much money should I be putting into different taxable account buckets? What's too much in the Roth? Am I going to pay too much in taxes if I do too much of a conversion now? Or how should I be invested to help my money to grow over 20 years in retirement, while also at the same time being invested in such a way that I can take withdrawals from that account and live off of it? A lot of these things that may be complicated when it gets into the details of that, I highly encourage you to get extra help if you need on that. There's no shame in that whatsoever. And a good place to start on getting that extra help is heading over to my site, retirementplanningmadeeasy.com, and just get instant access to this webinar masterclass called Reaching Retirement and Thriving Beyond, where we dive deep into the three main threats that you're going to face in retirement. And if you need additional help from there, I even include it in the webinar, how you can reach out to me, get on my calendar, and we can have that 15-minute, 20-minute chat over Zoom or over a telephone call where we just get to know each other, see what are you facing, what are some of the challenges you're up against, and see if there's something that we can possibly help you out with. That's all I got for today's episode. I'll see you guys on the next one. Y'all have a good week.